let's look back at last week, the fourth Super Series of the year. And we'll start off with the winners. We mentioned a couple of them just then. Joe Cullen, Jose de Sousa winning 2 of them, and Peter Wright. What did you take away from their title victories in Milton Keynes last week?
Well, I'll start with the person you'll be hearing from later. Well, actually, you're gonna hear from 2 of the players later, but I'll start with the one who won 2 events. That's because I think right now he is the best player in the world. His performances this past week moved him to right now being the best player. And it is a little fluid right now because we have been talking about that because, Gerwin Price and Johnny Clayton have every claim to it as well. But Jose just is getting better. And it's been seeming more and more likely that the time would come that he would become, at least on current form, the best player. But I think he's just going to keep getting better. And you look back not on one of the days he won, but on the first of the days of the week when he goes out and throws a 127 average just because that's what he can do. Okay, he lost the next match. He did regress a bit. You're going to regress from a 127. But what does he do the following day? He wins the title. What does he do the day after that? He wins the title. That's just what he does. He's playing at that type of level and having that level of confidence that we saw from Michael Van Gerwen a few years ago. He's not as consistently averaging 105 plus as Van Gerwen was when he was at his best. But he's getting closer to that. His poor games are becoming fewer, and they're becoming better. He's still averaging into the 90s even when he's off his game. And I said before, well, I guess I'd say last week, but I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, that I thought he'd win a couple titles. This was a chance for him to really put down the pedal and show what he can do. And he did that. He did even more than I thought he would do, even though he did win the 2 titles like I kind of tipped him to do. But boy, he is one hell of a player and only getting better. As far as Joe Cullen, he is the Pro Tour #1, and he's picking off these titles. He needs to do it on TV. We've been saying that for a long time, but I do think he's closer than he's ever been, because even when he was, getting to the World Match Play semifinals a few years ago, he wasn't as consistently playing at the level that he needed to be able to contend in one of these titles. He's never really had much of a B game. That's changing now. It might not be as good as it needs for him to be a top 10 player or a top 5 player right now, but he is developing a B game. The one thing he was missing is now showing up, and that's making difference. That's why he's the Pro Tour #1. You can't be the Pro Tour #1 if you don't have a B game. Joe Cullen now has one. And Peter Wright, it's been a poor year for him. He's been injured, but he looks like he's getting back to health, and he needed a title. He absolutely needed a title. Granted, so does Van Gerwen right now. Peter Wright got that title. Now he's in to show in the next week, or next couple of weeks with the next Super Series, that he still is in that conversation as the best player in the world. He hasn't been in the conversation so far this year because of his injuries and because of his poor form. Well, now he has that, hopefully the confidence that he needs to show that it's not just the 3 people I mentioned at the start of this question. It's still wide open as who's the best player, and he still has world championship money on his ranking. So, you know what? He has every right to say, I'm still there.
Some good points, and I'll go in chronological order if you like, and I'll start at the beginning with Joe Cullen, who won the first title of the week. And going into this Super Series, the last one that we've had, there was a lot of talk about it being the return of Gerwin Price, who missed the Premier League, missed the last Super Series after that positive COVID test. I think it was 86 days between his last appearance and this Super Series. It was the same with Joe Cullen as well. You're going to hear from him a bit later about why he didn't go to Germany, but he's been missing for a long time, and he comes back and sent out a statement. He wins that first title, and he agrees that he is starting to win games when he's not performing at his best, and that is the sign of a top player. If you're not performing at your best and you're able to grind out results, it can only be a good thing. And we saw that in the way that he won the title on Monday last week. He threw some good averages before then, a 105 against Ian White, a 99 against Martin Atkins. But the final 3 games, quarterfinals, semi-finals and the final, all against top players, James Wade, Michael Van Gerwen, Gerwin Price in the final, 93 average for all 3 games. And if you'd have said Joe Cullen would do that and win all 3 of those games maybe a couple of years ago, I don't think you'd have called it. But I think we're seeing now the timing is there with Joe Cullen more than it was before. He had some big finishes in those games. I think it was a 125 in the final, a 116 in the semi-final against Van Gerwen, and he's able to pull out some big legs on throw against throw when he needs them. And you touched on it there, that it is now a case of, can he produce this on TV, go and win a TV title or get to a final and cement himself in the top 10, top 8, maybe be in the Premier League next year, because we know that his stock has risen from that game that he had with Van Gogh at the World Championship. It's now, can he build on that for the rest of the year? And he's put himself in a good position the way he's performed this year. Jose, what more can we say? That 127 average was ridiculous, and I think it is the highest we've seen, in at least in the Dark Connect era of the PDC. I know there's a few stories going around when players have averaged 130 plus, but as far as the figures on a screen, that's the highest I think we've seen. And to win back-to-back titles takes some doing, especially in the current standard of players at the moment. But yeah, he's right up there, and still this is his third year on the tour. He's still very new to the PDC, and he's won big titles, the Grand Slam, he's won the European Tour titles, he's got to the Premier League final, but he still loves turning up to these Pro Tour events and putting on big performances, putting in big averages, and he's done that last week again. And finally, with Peter Wright, I think I'm going to call him the Terminator, because he just keeps coming back. When you start to write him off, he puts in a couple of bad performances. Even last week, he had an 89 average first round, lost. Second day, lost with an 86 average in the second round. Scraped through a couple of games on the third day to get to the quarterfinal, and even on the run to the title on the final day, scraped through the first couple of rounds, but a 170 finish in the decider against Ryan Joyce, and then he really did turn it on in those final three games. 103, 106, 108 average to win the title. Consistency wise, he's probably not where he was a few years ago. Is that to do with the change of darts all the time? I'm not quite so sure. Perhaps it is, perhaps it's not, but we are seeing that he is now more susceptible to throwing in a high 80s, low 90s average, but he is also capable of throwing in those big averages, the 106s, the 108s in semi-finals, in finals, to win the title. I don't think he's the second best player in the world right now. That's where his ranking is, but there's no doubt he is still one of the best in the world.